Hi, everybody. I am back from a weekend at Westwoods. We made it just in the nick of time to have a little bit of time with Paige and Amy and talk about boundaries. So the questions today are, do you say no to the good and yes to the bad? We're going to talk about different types of boundaries and understanding more about boundaries and understanding a little bit more about ourselves and how we can do better and do better in setting those boundaries. Be right back right after this. Give us a like, share this video. Welcome back, ladies. Nice boundary, Amy. Welcome back. So we made it just in the nick of time to get here to do our boundary study, and I hope you ladies had a great weekend.
Hope you
Amy,
did.
yeah, Amy, you look super refreshed there in beautiful sunny California.
I know. We're very fortunate. Very, very fortunate. It was actually pretty foggy this morning, though, so it was really nice. It was really nice.
Yeah. Paige, did you have a good weekend?
Great weekend. Just relaxed, celebrated a friend's birthday, and wonderful weekend.
Good stuff. How are you doing on the homework part of this? Like, I got ahead, so I was doing great. So I was like, yay, I'm not behind because I had gotten ahead. How are you doing on keeping up with the homework and staying on top of all that?
This week was a little challenging. This past week was a little bit busier for me than other weeks. And so I have listened to the book, and I probably did about like half of the work that we were supposed to do. So a little bit behind this week, but I think I have some room to catch up in this next week.
Yeah, that's all right. I think that's part of like sharing the journey with everybody on the show. I know I was talking to Westwood this weekend, and I was telling him like, okay, we're doing this boundaries book, and then we're going to do the raw food reboot. Sorry, I will get it right eventually.
It's okay.
And he's like, oh man, you're going to do that? You're going to do it on the show? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, and if I fall off the wagon one day, I will get back on the next day or the next minute. Or, I think that part of sharing some of that is important so that people feel like, everybody can do this kind of stuff together. You don't have to be perfect at everything you attempt, or we'd never try anything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I don't know why my husband has decided to mow the lawn right now outside I hope you guys can't hear that. I'm sure he was devastated to be away from his yard all weekend. So I'll try to mute myself if it gets too noisy. So I'm pretty sure that we are in the workbook on the part that says, I don't even want to say what chapter it says because the numbering is so off, but I'm pretty sure we're at the part where it says understanding boundaries. And it gets into the different types of boundaries, and it talks about like the compliant and the avoidant.
Yeah, the avoidant. Boundaries on chapter 3.
Is that chapter 3 in the book?
Yeah. Saying yes to the bad.
Yes.
Yeah, compliance.
So in my workbook, it says chapter 2. We just wanted to hear This makes me so crazy. Okay.
That it didn't line up with the book so much.
Yeah, that really messes with me, that it's not like jiving with the whole. I like a checklist. Like, I really like to check things off. It makes me feel good. I get the whole endorphin thing. Like, I like it to line up, and I like all the pins and the checking things off. And this has just been that part of this has really been a struggle for me, that this is not lining up the way that I thought it was going to line up. So
Yeah.
Challenging.
Sometimes that happens in life.
I know. We have to push through. Push through. I guess we could go through like a little description of each one of these types. What do you think? And
Yeah.
then kind of talk about, I don't think we have to expose our souls necessarily, but maybe if we felt like we could share something that might be beneficial to others, that would be great. Or share some of these questions. But the compliant thing, the compliance are saying yes to the bad, which I think that was a lot of that first lady's problem
Mm-hmm.
in the book, that she just said yes to everything. She had lacking the boundaries and just saying yes to everything. It seems like it said compliant people have fuzzy, indistinct boundaries. They melt into the demands and needs of other people. Compliance are chameleons. Their inability to say no to the bad is pervasive, and it keeps them from refusing and even recognizing evil. Their spiritual and emotional radar is broken. They have no ability to guard their hearts, which I think that is a huge deal that a lot of us, or a lot of myself, struggles with. Then goes into some of the questions. They talked about a lot about so a lot of this was understanding yourself, and so that you can grow and learn from, your experiences and all of that. So it said, as you were growing up, what did you learn about setting boundaries and saying no? Were those things good or bad? And how did you learn that? And a lot of my growing up, was in I had some stages or different seasons in my life. Like, when my biological dad was involved, it was a lot of, children are seen and not heard. Like as I was reading this, I was kind of thinking of, there were a couple things, like you'd get in a car and you'd say, "Where are we going?" And he'd say, "You're along for the ride." And I always thought, well, why can't he just tell me where we're going? Like, I don't understand why don't I get to know where we're going? Things like that. So feeling like out of control of my environment, that kind of thing. But then as I got, once he left, and then with my mom, it was different, of course, and more nurturing environment and all that. But uncertainty in that too. And then, I think we go through those seasons, and so it changes. And then we learn from also pushing back, and finding those no's. I had a pastor one time, and he was like, "You're very challenging to lead." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "You find the yes." He's like, if you want to do something, you keep asking until you find the yes. And I was like, I didn't think of myself as being difficult. I just, I was like, well, why? Well, why? Why not? Why?
Exactly.
What about this? Well, what about that? How about this? And he just wanted to give me one answer and me be okay with it and go away, So I was told I had a big ask before. I was like, oh, okay. Well, there is that.
I'm gonna get you a shirt that says I have a big ask.
I have a big ask. Yeah. It's probably true. It is true. I know it's true, because I will push when it comes for others, especially. So let's see, that was the growing up, and then they went into like the spiritual, emotional radar, functioning well in the moment. I don't know. Some of this is pretty personal, so I don't know if you guys want to share any of that, but if you want to share any of your experiences of growing up or learning about setting boundaries growing up and saying no, and what those things were those things good or bad, and how you learned about setting boundaries growing up, or when you noticed your spiritual or emotional radar not functioning well in the moment, and then kind of having a moment of recognition. I don't know if you want to share any of those kind of things. Those are kind of personal, but we can.
I mean, I'll go. I definitely feel the not like I'm a compliant person, but the chameleon aspect. I grew up in a divorced household. One house was one way, another house was another way, and so I kind of would chameleon back and forth into to feel safe, like all children do. And but I think that created, like, now that I'm an adult looking back, I think that created this almost like dual personality within me where it's like, okay, I can be this way with some people, I can be this way with another group of people. And so I kind of like learned to chameleon and not really like be my own authentic, true self. It was like, okay, how am I going to, survive at dad's house? How am I going to survive at mom's house and like keep both of these people happy? I don't get a lot of time with them. I want to make the most of it. And so those boundaries for me when I was younger were really hard to, it was really hard for me to create them and then enforce them. And so I can see how some people growing up, it's just, even if you have a loving home environment, even if everything is, great there, it can still be really hard to develop boundaries. And just from like your situation, the environment that you're in. So I definitely experienced that as a child. And now that I'm an adult, I really recognize like being a chameleon, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to speak up with this group, but I will with this group. And so just trying to live from a more authentic place and like always showing up, like saying the thing no matter who's in front of me. And it can be really challenging as an adult to do that because I'm conditioned to not do that. And so yeah, I think that's my experience with
So
growing
that
out.
could be like a strength and a weakness, but I see where you're saying like I'm challenging myself to be more authentic all the time in all things, but like, in work situations or whatever, like I could see um being well, even then, you should always be your most authentic self. At the same time, I could see that being a strength of learning to adapt, or it is a survival
I was
skill, I
gonna
guess.
say.
You really developed a survival skill.
Mhm.
So I mean, yeah, it's wild to me that these challenges in our life, they make us who we are. And that doesn't mean we can't grow or change, or develop from that or develop lessons from that. But sometimes not all bad things are bad, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just about honing in on it and recognizing, how was my childhood and do I want to carry this into my adulthood? And what are the things that need to change so that I can honor myself while still being this person that's able to adapt and be flexible and get along with different people. So there's definitely positives along with the negatives. And it really does truly just like round us out as human beings.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're evaluating it that way. Like, what pieces am I choosing? And being really conscious of that. What pieces do I choose to carry forward to my adulthood? Like,
Yeah.
that's really, really amazing. Let's see. Then they go into adults whose radar might be broken, still saying yes to bad things. Um, then they get personal again. What bad things have you said no to in the past? I'm like, I don't think there's enough room on the page to write down all the things I probably said yes to in the past that I shouldn't have. Goodness, and then what bad things might you be saying yes to right now? Um, and I wrote really small, so I can't really read it, so I won't share it to you. Oh, that was about having a boundaries with my time, and um, I said, do you remember on was it Pretty Woman? No, it wasn't Pretty Woman. I can't remember what it was. There's a movie where they say I'm not going to be like your call girl or something about something about your call girl, but it meant like I'm not going to always be there for you to just call whenever
That was Pretty Woman. Yeah.
Was it Pretty Woman? Okay. I was trying to I'm terrible at quoting all those movies things. But it was like, don't take advantage of my kindness, or don't take advantage of my time or my interest in a project or something. And then just assume that I'm always gonna be around, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And because I can get really excited about something and want to be a part of a project or a thing, or and to the point that I will let my time be abused or my efforts be abused.
Mm-hmm.
And I will just, work till 2, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever. It's fine. I'll do it. Oh, it's fine. I know you just called me at the last minute. It's fine. Yeah, that's probably my biggest struggle, just because I get really excited about being part of some of those, things that I really want to be a part of, something I feel passionate about. That's when my boundary gets bent, that I need to say, no, you said like all day Sunday was family day. And if they waited to call you till Sunday morning, then too bad, and
Yeah.
just really holding strong on that kind of stuff. I think that's a challenge.
I think that brings us to our next question of, why does the word no seem to get stuck in your throat when you do need to protect yourself? And why are you unable to say no? It's usually like fear of hurting other people's feelings, fear of abandonment, fear of anger, punishment.
I am definitely all those. I am.
All of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of the above,
All of
you
them.
would say?
Yeah. It's not on there, but yeah, I would say.
I know I didn't even write anything on it. I think I just wrote check marks, like what I either put like 1 check mark or 2 check marks if it was like more
Yeah.
on some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think mine typically tend to be fear of hurting someone else's feelings. Like, I'll do things to just save other people's feelings, which, like, it never ends up being the right call. It always comes up later. And fear of abandonment or rejection, just as a person, like losing that connection with someone, or them seeing truly who I am and being terrified that they're not going to love me anymore. Though I think those ring most true for me in my life. And usually that's what I hear from other people as well, are those two top ones.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical, the abandonment or separateness, and then also not trust, the one that they said fear of being shamed, and I put not trusting my own judgment,
Yeah.
um, like looking to others to validate my worth.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to be good enough, and be seen as valuable in someone else's eyes. That was one of the other ones. That next part, did you guys really understand that? I had a big question mark by that. I don't know if it was the wording, but it was fear of your own conscience is actually experienced as guilt. I didn't really understand that.
Your own conscience.
Um,
Oh, yeah. I had a problem with that question as well.
well, I mean, I interpret this as like, when we say we want something, or we're consciously doing something, sometimes that can be like, oh, I feel guilty because I feel this way, or like just whatever your feelings are, like it just is initial, like it initially goes to like guilt or shame. And I think that goes back to, trusting yourself and having and knowing that you can set boundaries and trust those boundaries and commit to them. But
Mm.
I think this also goes along with First Corinthians, that the verse. And so
Okay.
I didn't I didn't actually go and look up that verse. So there might be some more information.
Okay. That might have been why, because I was just like, fear of your own conscience, that like through that part threw me. But that makes a lot of sense. So they're talking.
Explanation page. That was good.
Does it have a page on it? Page 53.
Then it says that over-strict conscience is your unbiblical and critical internal parent whom you are afraid to confront and who is behind your self-condemnation. So I think we learn as a child to guilt ourselves into things. We learn that just our feelings are bad, or our parents punish us for saying no or having our own boundaries when it doesn't fit into, a certain their lifestyle or a certain thing that they're doing. And so you kind of learn that like your own feelings and your own boundaries are not necessarily the best, and like something that you should kind of feel guilt over. And I think for children, like it doesn't take a lot for a child's brain to react to something as like a fearful thing or something to feel guilty over. It could be a really small, like shaming for something, which the parent didn't even mean to shame them. But it doesn't have to be some like big traumatic experience for a child's brains to completely just take that in as a huge trauma. And so I think this kind of goes hand in hand with that, and just kind of learning how to judge ourselves from a really young age and stay safe and not upset our parents. And then, this self is formed that's not even this child's true spirit.
Yeah, I think you are right on. And Fever Flav says, like when you beat yourself up for not doing something for another. I get it. So I think you're right on. Like it's the you're not as important as someone else. And when you put a boundary in that place, then it's like you are putting yourself above other people. And so the guilt all comes in with that. There's so much guilt involved with all this.
It's almost, I kind of take it as like, like the whole Jiminy Cricket with the Pinocchio. He was Pinocchio's conscience, and like he was saying things, and then Pinocchio was like not listening to him. So
that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I grew up on a lot of Disney, Sesame Street, all that stuff. So
yeah. Let's see. The next one goes on to, when has compassion motivated you to say yes or no to some responsibility? How did you feel about taking on additional responsibility? Can you see the difference between motivated by compassion or being motivated by guilt? So was there something where you were motivated in a positive way by compassion or guilt, and not by guilt, where you had a healthy motivation? I think we could share like a healthy example and tell the difference, because we've been talking a lot about guilt and giving lots of those examples. But I know there's been lots of times where like we've had that, where you've watered your yard, right? We know to take care of ourselves and put our own mask on first and all that kind of stuff. And then we had margin in our life where we could then help someone else that needed help in our life. Like last week or week before last, I had Cannon and his little buddy at school's mom had back surgery. And I was like, hey, no problem. Let me take your son for a few days. So I had the two of them. Cannon stayed busy because he had a little friend playing with him. It was great for me. It helped out the family. Like it did not burden me, and I was able to help and say yes in a great way because I made sure that I already had the things done to take care of myself first, and I didn't say yes to everything. Like I didn't go do all her laundry and take care of her other 3 boys, only the one that was Cannon's age. So I had boundaries with that too, So where have you guys done something where you were motivated by compassion and could say yes with healthy boundaries and felt?
Mine usually has to do when just helping out family pretty much. When they're not able to do something for themselves. I cook meals for my in-laws. I'll, spend some time, I'll babysit my nieces, even though they don't need to be babysat.
Mhm.
Kind of thing, even though I might have had something going on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, mine's always with friends and like doing things for friends and knowing that it's going to be like it's a reciprocated thing with friends. It's always that always makes me feel really good where it's like, okay, if I know if I'm showing up for you that you're going to show up for me if I'm in need. And I know that like that compassion is going to be at the other end of this as well. And so but I feel like when it's guilt, it's like, ugh, like I have to do this no matter what, no matter what it is, I have to do this. But then when it's compassion, it's like, okay, I can assess I'm truly giving this from my heart. I'm giving this from a really good place. And those two things, they feel different when you're doing those. And so I always find mine come up with friends. Like I had a friend that went through a breakup and we have an extra room in our house. And so she came and stayed with us for a couple weeks and, it's your home and I live with my partner. And so it can be a lot to have someone in your home, but it's like, I have compassion for her and where she's at and just wanting to help out. And so that's where I typically see it in my life.
Yeah, just watching us all talk about it. It all had to do with community.
Mhm.
And the feeling of it was we didn't talk about it with a burden in our energy or our voices when we were talking about it. Like it wasn't exhausting for us to all talk about it. We were all talking about community and adding to the community or adding strength or value to our community, it seems like. So that's definitely something else that I would say is, a big difference when you're um, giving or giving and motivated by compassion, then you're adding value to your community or your, in your situation, not the guilt thing where it is so draining, like where you're all going down together. Paige, do you want to hit on some of the other ones or you want me to pick out a couple other ones or should we move on to avoidance?
I'm gonna move on to avoidance. I know this is a pretty
great of you not to avoid it.
a pretty long chapter in the workbook, so
Yeah.
Yeah. So we could just like maybe do each type and then just do one or two questions. Yeah, maybe not all of them because otherwise we'll be here all night.
This one's a long one.
It is.
Mhm.
Long chapter.
Yep.
So it says avoidance is the inability to ask for help, to recognize one's own needs, and to let others in. Avoidance withdraw when they are in need and they do not ask for the support of other people. Those who are like Rachel avoid opportunities for others to love them as they have loved others. Boundaries are supposed to be fences with gates that let the good in and the bad out. Boundaries are not supposed to be walls. And first question, are your boundaries more like walls than fences? And explained why you answered as you did.
Yeah. So in the book, they talked about this lady who like was in a Bible study or something, and everybody shared in the group, and she was hosting the Bible study at her house. So she's used to being the giver. And then once it came around to hers, she was like, oh, all these people have had all this horrible stuff they're sharing and whatever. And I don't want to share my little one thing. And so instead she like hops up and goes, let me get everyone a snack. And then, yeah. And then everyone felt like, you know what? I showed you mine. Show me yours. So I think in her mind, she thought she was doing the right thing, the nice thing, but she actually wasn't opening up and sharing. And it does make you feel really vulnerable to share. I think, we talked about that kind of earlier with the feeling like ashamed or worried about being less than or whatever.
Mhm.
That kind of goes along with this too, I think. But I definitely struggle with this a lot. I'm just very black and white. And so like you're either in my circle of trust or you are out.
Right.
And this is where this is something that in this study I'm working on, being working on. I'm gonna work on my fences and my gates, because there is a place to have a gate. You want to have a healthy fence. You need to have gates and not walls, and so I really liked this part, because I think it's important to be able to let the bad out. You have to have that gate and have some growth and not be so hardcore. Because I'm very guilty of that. Like I think because I've been hurt in the past so much that I've clung to this so deeply that it protected me in the past. Boundaries have protected me in the past. And so I feel like, oh, you just have to have all your boundaries all the time. Well, there are times when you need to maybe move a boundary, open a gate, meet somebody at the fence and have a conversation, maybe. I don't know. Maybe think about moving the fence. So I think that can be challenging for people that are avoidance. That's my own experience with that. Do you guys struggle with any of that, saying no to good things because you're just rigid on some things?
Yeah, I do. I'm very guilty of it. And this was one of the ones that I actually was able to kind of like really dig in and write a lot of stuff down. But I definitely have a lot of walls when it comes to asking others for help, or even divulging like what I feel is, what are problems. So
Yeah, and I think there's just the story of Rachel, and there's a problem with like intimacy and truly just being vulnerable with people and having people that you can trust and know that you can show up and say what you need to say, and they're going to love you and be there and care for you. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have strong boundaries and enforce them and know that other people are going to respect them. And I think that's something that in the past was just lacking within society as a whole. And I think now we're moving more into being more open, being more vulnerable with people, and knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have emotions and feelings, and things are going to come up. And to enforce these boundaries, these fences, it requires like expert communication as well, and like trusting in yourself and knowing that you can communicate what you want, and other people are going to receive that communication well and be able to have a nice little like ping pong match with you, instead of like just like one person like dunking on you the whole time and they're like, no, like shut down, shut down. It should be more of like that nice little ping pong game back and forth, like, okay, over here, over here. And so I think personally, my boundaries are a little more like fences. It's kind of like a game time decision for me sometimes. Like if it needs to be moved, let's move it. Um, for most boundaries. And then other boundaries are like firm walls that are like, nope, that's not changing. So I
That's
think I have a
awesome.
little bit of both personally. And I think the rigid ones are the ones that make me feel very safe and secure, either just personally or in relationships with people. And those are rooted into like deep childhood, like wounding or, conditionings. And so those are the ones that I'm trying to build into fences.
And grow. Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. I think you said something about the ping pong and the relationship, having that talk and feeling. I can't remember what words you said, but I was feeling like being tolerated, or that feeling of your ideas being heard. Being able to have a conversation with somebody when you're talking about being dunked on or whatever, like sometimes you feel like, okay, I just have to have a boundary with this person because like I can't even have that conversation. You know what I mean? So it's just a hard no, because you can't go there with them. So when you can have that communication, like you were saying, that how important the strong communication is, to be able to have those fences and gates and all that, and move those things forward. Yeah. Paige is wise beyond her years. Yeah. Well, she's got a great mom,
Oh, no.
And having those boundaries within yourself and realizing like, okay, I typically am the yeller in my like relationship with people. Like I yell all the time, and then it always yields these results. And so I think part of boundaries is also setting personal boundaries of like, okay, I am not going to raise my voice, and maybe I'll get different results from these people. And then you do, and then you're able to like really have that ping pong back and forth. You're hearing their ideas, your ideas are being heard. So I think this also, it's like a personal thing and having those boundaries with other people, but holding yourself accountable first, I think is just so important in like interpersonal relationships. Because usually if one person changes, the other person has to change as well. And
Yeah, that's
in the
great.
past, I found that to be just a total game changer with relationships with friends, family, partners, all the above.
Parents.
All of that stuff. So the next type is controllers, not respecting others' boundaries. So it says controllers see a person's no as a challenge to change his or her mind. Controllers can't respect other people's limits. They resist taking responsibility for their own lives, so they need to control people's lives. Controllers are therefore perceived as manipulative and aggressive bullies, which I just was telling you how I was bullying my pastor. So there you go. I don't think that's exactly what I was talking about, but anyway, but I think they're talking about really pushing other people's boundaries with their personal boundaries, not necessarily like ministry choices. But anyway, so the first question out of the gate is, in what relationships, or that's pretty personal, relationship or personal, perceived as a controller? We don't know that any of us are controllers.
I like the next question. When have you
do the next one.
an aggressive controller? What did he or she demand of you, and how did you respond?
Yes. That's very scary.
Yeah. Might be a little too personal. I don't think I can answer that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I think just like an overall theme, just to touch on this, is like when you do come up against an aggressive controller and you don't have the tools necessary to hold firm on your boundaries, it can be really scary because they try all of these different techniques and control mechanisms to like really kind of get you in your head and do exactly what they want you to do. And so just as a whole, from what I'm gathering from both you ladies right now, is it's just typically a very scary feeling. You don't feel safe, you don't feel heard. And then
Sometimes you have to get a third party involved.
yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes these aggressive controllers can be like really sneaky in how they control people, like manipulating them, gaslighting them, and then they really make you question everything about yourself.
Wow.
And like they literally make you feel crazy or try to turn your friends against you or you know, whatever it may be. But I just like every time, like you just feel terrible. You know something's off, but then you don't really know how to address it, or like you like second guess yourself that this is actually happening. So I think these aggressive controllers, it's just like it's never fun to encounter them, and just kind of shows how much work they really need to do, but how we always do have the power to set boundaries and stay true to ourselves and like get out of those situations in a healthy way.
Yeah, I will say the next question, I kind of tried to really reflect on when I had ever been guilty of this. And I'm sure that we all have, you know, just whether it was well intended or not. Or I put on here, I was hoping Carly was going to be on here because I was going to talk to her about. So she recently got married and I wanted her to have the experience I didn't have. And so I was telling her, like, I really wanted her to have this wedding dress and I wanted her to have the whole experience. And so, like, I made this appointment and, well, first she made this appointment with her girlfriends and then, you know, and then trying on the dresses and whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's cute and whatever. And then I was like, well, let's go to this other place that's nicer. And then let's, you know, and she's standing there in tears and I'm like, what's wrong? You know, and she's like, she was not doing it for her. She was doing it for me, you know, and of course, even then she wasn't saying that to me because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. And so, like, I didn't realize it till months later, you know, and so even in the moment and somebody being well-intended, or thinking I'm doing something nice, you know, I wasn't trying to hurt her, but I was pushing my agenda on her because I wanted her to have an experience that I thought would be good for her. And she didn't push back on me because she loves me, because I'm her mom, you know. So that was our little dance with our boundaries that so, you know, it's just those kind of things can happen even in a loving relationship, you know, that boundaries are important. Not always just to protect yourself, but to protect the relationship. And so that you can have that, like Paige, like you were saying earlier about the intimacy, or maybe Amy said that. One of you was talking about how it allows you to have more intimacy if you can have those healthy boundaries. And so, because we all want that connection and community, I think that's what, especially now after going through the great infection, we're all just, you know, craving community and closeness with each other. And I think we're all, you know, that we're all kind of moving towards that too. This great awakening is all part of us coming together, you know. So, and with that, we want to do that in the most loving way. So, anyway, I wanted to share that. Yes.
It can come from a really good place. Yeah. But it's still, at the end of the day, it is controlling. You're not letting that person live their truth. And
it's not the best thing for the relationship. It's not healthy for the relationship for either of you. Yeah. Paige, you want to read the next one? The non-responsives.
I feel like this whole page is pretty personal. So
yeah, I was saying, like, why don't we hop to the next kind, the non-responsives? Yeah, because it does get into like a lot of how are you.
Termed non-responsives, these individuals do not pay attention to the responsibilities of love. we are responsible to care about and help with certain limits, people whom God placed in our lives. While we shouldn't take the responsibility of others' feelings, attitudes, and behaviors, we do have certain responsibilities to each other. That's why the issue of non-responsiveness is more than just insensitivity. And then, when have you been a non-responsive and failed to act according to your responsibilities to another person? I do this all the time.
Right?
I'm
Really?
total non-responsive. I have a thing with my phone. Like, it takes me so long to respond to people. And it's usually based on like, I want to make sure I have a lot of time to respond. I don't want it to just be like a short one-word answer. So I'll put it off, or I'll be like, oh, I have to get all of these things done before I respond to someone because I'm just so busy today. And then like 3 days goes by, and so I'll make up all these excuses. And then another for me being like, I guess non-responsive, but like not reaching out to people. And I just uncovered this recently. It's just this massive fear of rejection that's like at my core. And it's like, oh, sorry, I can't go on that walk with you today. I have to XYZ. My brain internalizes that as like, they don't love me. They don't want to hang out with me. I've been rejected. And like the worst feeling ever. And so I've learned recently that a lot of my non-responsiveness comes from my own traumas and protective mechanisms, and so this is an area of my life that I am really trying to work on. It's the area of my life that has destroyed the most relationships in my life, so I can definitely see how non-responsive people, just like myself, just really lack boundaries around communication and showing up, and it's possible to grow in these areas.
Like the irony is that you want community, but your anxiety or in wanting that causes you to be pushed away from it.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
Like the thing that you want is the actual thing that's driving you away from everybody.
Yeah. Oh, so the non-responsive thing that I was talking about, let's see, where was I? I said that I really don't have an expectation of care from others. So like I just if I don't take care of myself, then I find myself resentful and overextended when I do, because they said, how does taking care of yourself or not taking care of yourself affect your ability and willingness to help other people? And I said, if I don't take care of myself, then I find myself, when I do help others, I start feeling resentful and overextended when I do help others. But I think that maybe I jumped ahead. Hold on. Is that
It's
on the
still in
next
the same
part?
realm as the non-responsive.
Okay. Yeah, because I just put that I didn't. They said, when you have come up against a non-responsive, what kind of response did you hope for, and what kind of response did you get? And I said, I don't have an expectation of care from others. So, and I think that's probably from abandonment crap or whatever. So I don't think about. I also have the avoidant thing, So like it's like, oh, that's okay. I'll do it myself, and then that way I don't feel like I'm a burden to you.
That's why we can be friends.
Yes, that can go hand in hand. It'll be fine.
It can, it really does. And you see it go hand in hand. If you really start breaking down people's like closest relationships, you can really see, like, my best friend, her biggest fear is a fear of abandonment. So she always reaches out. Then mine is rejection. So I never reach out. But it works well for us. Like, well,
There was a chart in here that I thought was really interesting. Yeah. And I was like, oh. And I've had those friends before that are really needy, and I care for them. I'm just not that girl.
Yeah.
Like, call me, or I'll call you, but if we hadn't talked in a couple months, I still feel the same for you. It's just, we must have both been busy or something, but it doesn't mean I love you any less, or
Yeah.
but then I'll have some friends that they're like devastated because, I didn't call them every week. And I'm like, well, why didn't you call? If that's important for you, why didn't you call me? Then I would have loved to talk to you. I just was really busy. Yeah. It really, all of us little broken pieces bumping into each other, I always say,
That's a great one.
Yeah. Because I think we're all well-intended, but all of our past hurts, and that's where once again goes back to what Paige was saying about the communication so important. Just when you care about somebody, reach out or have those conversations before you. There's a thing at my kids' jujitsu, and it said, I'll have to take a picture of it, but it had like, one of the things was like, don't assume what the other person's thinking or saying or thinking about, make sure you have a conversation about it. Treat each other with respect, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I had a couple little things and I was like, yeah, because I think we get in our head that, oh, well, they must be mad at me about XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, you have this whole narrative in your head that doesn't even exist to that other person.
Yep.
They just really were busy that week.
Yeah.
Or their dog died, or who knows what, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It is not always all about us in someone else's head. So, anyway, I think that's interesting. Then, so it jumps into functional and relational boundary issues and the difference between that. So like, it's my understanding, functional boundary issues are like, you could like more of like a work situation. Like you can set boundaries to get things done, task oriented, that kind of thing. And then relational is more about like what we're talking about, boundaries in relationships, different things like that. So like somebody could be really good at getting stuff done, setting boundaries with tasks, checking the boxes, all those kind of things, but maybe not so good at having healthy boundaries in relationships and vice versa. And that's where I had talked about, I think I talked about it here about, I had a friend about like talking about, breaking things down into smaller tasks. As far as the tasks, like just don't clean your whole refrigerator, just take the vegetable drawer out, or, don't have such an overwhelming task where you feel like you can't, because giving yourself permission to stop. And then, okay, then if I have more time, I'll do the other vegetable drawer. And then because I think life comes at us, and we feel like, oh gosh, what if something happens and I'm not going to be able to I'm going to have all the food out on the counter and, the end of the world is going to happen and then I can't put it all back or whatever. And I had this one saying that somebody told me once that I thought it really changed a lot and it helped me with my boundaries. When you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. So just know what it is that you're saying no to and be okay with that. Because you the old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You only have so much time, money, all those things. So whatever that is, that new thing that you're saying yes to, just understand what was going to be in its place and that you're saying no to that thing. And as long as you're okay with that, then you're not going to have that resentful, because that's where I get overextended because I'll say yes to too many things. And then I'm like, oh crap, now I have to say no to this thing that I really wanted to do. And then I get resentful about it. So that's, those are some things that have helped me with that as far as balancing that functional relationship boundary issues kind of thing. What are some things that are you good at, like functional and relational boundary issues, or do you do better with one than the other?
I do a lot better with functional. And I think it kind of, it has to do with the fact that I think that my relational boundaries aren't that great. It's like I overcompensate on the functional because I do it so well that it I don't want to deal with my relational boundaries because
You're going to go clean something.
I would say I do some of that, like just chaotic prioritization of certain boundaries or tasks where it's like, okay, you should probably really sit down and like have a discussion with your partner about how you've been feeling the past week and like feelings that came up. But instead, you're like, oh my gosh, my entire house needs to be cleaned. I definitely need to clean the house. Definitely. It's going to actually kill me. Physically, it will kill me if I do not clean the house, even though it hasn't been cleaned in 3 weeks, but I need to clean it right now. And, I've definitely been trying to be more aware of that chaotic prioritization coming up and, just doing the thing that I need to do and telling myself like, "Okay, you haven't cleaned this in a couple weeks and it's been fine every other day. What makes this any different?" And then you can really start to, like, ask yourself the right questions to kind of get yourself in a position where you feel comfortable doing the tasks that you really need to do, which I find is usually in the relational side and not on the functional side. Um,
Mhm.
but I think, like, the question, to what do you credit your success or struggle with functional boundaries? Um, I think that's just really, in childhood, that's where it all starts. And if you're able to really have boundaries or have choices and really follow through with those things as a kid, and you really develop that, it's easier to maintain that in adulthood. But I I feel like I'm also better at functional boundaries than relational boundaries. Um, those have always just been a little bit easier. It's like, "Okay, tell me what to do, and I will do it."
I think because it's like that, it's more tangible, I think, too. Like it can be that checklist or that thing to do or whatever, it makes it a little, and you get that sense of accomplishment where like a relational boundary, like, okay, this is really good and healthy, but it's like always a work in progress. It's a moving target kind of thing with a relational boundary, it feels like.
And we have more
Um,
practice, like, from
Good
childhood,
point.
we have more practice with functional boundaries. You're in school, you have a task, complete this, you get a gold star. Those reward systems in our brains
Yeah.
fire a lot more rapidly than relational boundaries because when are you as a kid like, "Mom, boundary." Like, you're not strengthening those muscles of, like, boundary building with your family, and it's hard to be the one to set boundaries as a kid, and your parents are the ones setting them, and so I think, um, those muscles just aren't as strong by the time we get to adulthood, and it takes a lot for parents to be open to receiving their children's boundaries and what they want, and being able to, like, let them test boundaries while also still being the parent, and so, I think that also plays a factor into why the relational boundaries are a little bit harder.
That goes right into the next part, which I loved. So this, and I called my mom, and I had some real growth on this, and um, really appreciated. I was able to see. Um, I guess I felt like I learned so much raising my kids, but I didn't really see, and I felt the way my mother loved me, and that was a lot of the way that I felt that I learned how God loved me, but I missed a little bit there. And I hope I still do, and I hope I'm still growing and learning, but there's this one thing. So like my mom would send me these pictures of this child screaming or destroying something. And she's like, "Look." And I'm like, "Why do you think that is cute?" Like, I wanted to be somebody's little cute little girl. And she sent me pictures of this little brat, like either destroying something or screaming. And I could never understand why she thought that was cute. And I seemed like I was in distress. And I was just like, why do you think that's cute? And so when we did this boundary development, that's next part, and they go into like how the boundaries are developed, and then it goes into all your childhood and all this. And they start talking about, in Proverbs 2:26, or 22:6, what does that mean? Start children in the way they should go. And when they are old, they will not depart from it, and how that's misunderstood a lot of times. And it's not about the way the parents think they should go, but the way that they were intended, or the way they were created by God, the universe, to go and be. And she said, yeah, she said, because I loved the little independent spirit that you were. She said, you weren't the little sit in the corner with your hands on your lap. You were like, no, and gonna do it myself, and talking in full sentences at 9 and 10 months old, and running around the house. And they literally talk about the hatchling, the early hatcher or whatever, and bonding and all that. And they talk about, because the bonding was so strong, let's see, I talked about it in here, like talking about when, like, on commercials and stuff, they always show these little babies walking towards their parents, and they're like, that's actually not accurate. Most kids' first steps are up and walking away from their parents. And that's because they're learning that they are separate from their parents. They're learning the difference between themselves and, oh, no, I can say no to my mom because I am not part of my mom anymore, And so I love this part of the book, and I was able to see this other part of it, that she was taking joy in my independence, and my being the little hatchling. And the reason that I felt so safe to do that was because I felt so bonded to her, because I felt so safe and nurtured and loved. And my little Carly was the same way. She'd push me away as a little infant. And if you were trying to rock her to sleep, you want her to go to sleep, put her down.
Yeah.
And she would go to sleep, and she'd climb in her bed, and walk around. And it was the same way. She really just was super independent. So I thought that was really cool, about how important relationships and family are, and how much we need community to have those strong, so that we can form strong boundaries, so that we know the difference between us and them, but be able to then go explore and have all those boundaries. So now that I've ranted on you guys and shared all my childhood independence things, what were your experiences of like finding your independence or finding those moments? Do you have any of those kind of moments?
I don't. I think I was, well, I was kind of like you. I think I was just so bonded with my mom that I felt comfortable enough to do pretty much anything.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I was in trouble a lot. So
I was also in trouble a lot later.
I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest of all of my sisters. So I was held to, I think, what is a much higher standard than what my sisters were raised as.
Oh, okay. I was the middle child, so
okay.
if that tells you anything. Yeah. Oh, I got in trouble. Paige, how did you feel about your bond? That's pretty personal. You don't have to share, but
No, I think I was going from household to household from a very young age, and I think I was always like the good kid. I was the good kid. I don't get in trouble. I listen. I want to do all the right things, but I was also very curious as a child, and I was like, if I'm curious about it, I'm going to do it. And I didn't necessarily fear the punishment. I feared not being loved anymore. And so I think I didn't really test a ton of boundaries when I was a kid. I was like, okay, you said I can't do this, I won't do this. And the ways that I would test boundaries were like so innocent. Like one thing, I was always in trouble for like not cleaning my room. I was just like, I'm not going to clean it. It's going to be the dirtiest thing ever. There's clothes everywhere. You can't find anything. And looking back, it was like it was like the only way I could really rebel, because it's like, okay, what are you going to say? Make clean my room, you know?
I'm still leaving in 3 days, and what are you gonna do about it? Yeah. Mhm.
That was always my way of like pushing back and kind of testing those boundaries. But I think I was just so obsessed with like being good that I tended to shy away from like really experiencing myself and what I wanted to do. And um yeah, so I wanted to like keep the peace.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to end on a negative note, but I do want to just touch on boundary injuries and what happens when it goes wrong. Um, I think we've all had those situations. Paige, you had mentioned before, like, oh, when I intend this and then I chose the wrong thing, with a friend or something. And I know in parenting myself, like I'll go through seasons in parenting and put a boundary, and someone will withdraw from that boundary, and it can even be a healthy boundary that somebody can withdraw from, and there can be injuries there, and all that, and kind of how you can't always fix it either. I think they talk about let's see, they go on to talk about withdrawing and what happens, the importance of not withdrawing when somebody sets a boundary that we don't like. So if somebody else were to set a boundary that we don't necessarily like, it's important to stay engaged. And I think that's where the avoidance thing kind of comes in. Like, it's important to not check out or be lost or be gone, stay engaged. And maybe those are two separate things. Because after listening to you talk about the or non-responsive, because I wouldn't say that you are not engaged or uncaring, but you don't necessarily withdraw if somebody puts a boundary.
Yeah, if there
right?
is a boundary set, I'm like the people pleaser. I'm like, okay, let me know. I'll do this different. Like, I'll try to switch up my actions so that you feel more comfortable. And but even that, like I have withdrawn from that, because there's times when people are like, just respond, and then I still like just can't do it. And so I think there is a little bit of withdrawal from the boundary there, and there's also a little bit of just those. I feel like sometimes those are my own boundaries of like time and space, and like I don't necessarily want to respond, and I shouldn't have to feel obligated to respond. So it's like this dueling, like my own boundaries, and then also not withdrawing from other people's boundaries. So it's a fine dance we do.
Yeah.
Communication on my end.
It really is. Yeah, that was the part that I put down for that, was the not withdrawing, I think. And I think that goes back to the fear of abandonment stuff that we all kind of face with that, when they talked about the boundary injuries, or what goes wrong with staying engaged with somebody when you put a boundary up, or when they put a boundary up, or when there is a boundary and that boundary is met. Doesn't matter really who's on what side of the fence, you can still be involved. It makes me think of the Fockers movie. This is the circle of trust.
Yeah.
Are you in the circle of trust or out of the circle of trust? We always say, like, whether you're in the circle of trust or out of the circle of trust, we love you. It's just that when we talk to our kids, we talk to them about this. It's just that, in here is the resources. And you can make choices that, are inside the circle of trust, or you can be out here and making your own choices, and we still love you, but the resources are inside the circle of trust. So that's kind of when Charlie and I were having conversations with kiddos over the years, and talking with them about that. Like, you still can be engaged, and not withdraw from somebody, but you can respect that boundary that, like, hey, I'm not paying your bills if you're making those choices, but I still love you and I want to see you, and you're still in my life.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, though, for sure.
Very challenging.
Yeah. Was there anything else you guys wanted to touch on? I think that's almost the last of it. They went on to talk about trauma, and but some of that stuff gets real personal, so I didn't want to
Just a little heavy.
push anybody on
Heavy
that.
for a Monday.
It's a heck of a way to end a day. Yeah. The inconsistent limits. I thought, Paige, you've already really touched on that with the, I think a lot of kids, so many kids in divorced homes, are a lot of times in that situation when parents aren't co-parenting on the same level, aren't having good communication. That can put kids in a difficult situation, having inconsistent limits.
It's just like being two different people. It's like clearly
Different
these two
situation.
individuals don't mesh well on like a marriage level. So that must mean their personalities and like characteristics and values are inherently different. And so but then you have a child put in that equation, and then you have two very different people, and then this kid is going back and forth. And so you're just like constantly around new energy, values, ideas, ways of communicating. And like, yeah, I can just see how there's that lack of like limits and boundaries, and how it can just kind of like blur a lot of those boundary lines for children.
Yeah. So much of this, like, it has been, goes back to how we were raised and how that affects us and all that. And then, this life is about healing and this journey of growing and learning about ourselves and our surroundings and our community. And then I think about, the relationships that we choose from there as we grow older. And we learn how to protect ourselves and make choices for ourselves and put these boundaries in place, and then choose to open those gates and let people in. And I am just so grateful for the two of you. And we had a great weekend at Westwoods this weekend and got to see a lot of friends. And I just feel like my cup is filled up again. Got to spend some great time alone with my husband. And I think community is just so important in this time. And so I'm hoping, I'm looking forward to our time together in January, even though I don't want to eat a bunch of salad before that, but I'm going to do it. We're going to do it together. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be great.
Thank you for having us on again and bringing the community together like you always do, Lisa.
Yes.
Very fun.
So next week we will do, we're still in the part 1 in the workbook. I shouldn't even say what part, but it's going to be, the title of it is 10 Laws of Boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do. I lost Amy. Nope, she's back.
I'm back.
I don't know what happened. Something magical.
It's
We
all
just
right.
did musical chairs.
Anyway,
It's
it's in the book. It's chapter 5 in the book.
Okay. In the book.
The actual book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So chapter 5 in the book, 10 Laws of Boundaries. We will be back next Monday. And then the next week are you guys going to Litecoin Summit?
I
Or
don't
do
know.
you know?
No.
I don't think we are either. We haven't decided yet, but that's my birthday weekend. So
Next weekend?
Is it next weekend?
the 21st,
Okay.
that weekend. So we'll see. I don't know. I doubt it. But anyway, we'll see what's going on. All right. We'll see you guys on Monday for the 10 laws.
See you Monday.
Okay. Bye.